We are live, and it usually takes about 12 seconds between hitting the go live button and when people start to join you on LinkedIn Live anyway. But we are also streaming to Facebook and YouTube because, well, why not? This is going to be a really interesting conversation. So let's stream it all over the place. Welcome to this impromptu LinkedIn Live where I am joined with the wonderful Amy Rowlinson, where we're going to be talking about the marketing benefits of podcasting, because Amy and I were chatting about this and we still feel like it is a massively underrated marketing strategy. And I think a lot of people misunderstand how easy it is to access podcasting as a marketing strategy. And Amy specializes in helping people launch their podcasts and understand more of the marketing benefits as well. So we thought, let's do a live conversation, have a bit of a chat about it. And if you have any questions at all, then just write a comment and we will get to it during this conversation. If you're joining us by watching the replay, just put a hashtag replay in the comments and either tag myself or Amy, and we'll get back to you and answer your question at a later date. So yeah, so Amy, podcasting, what got you into podcasting?
Yeah, I hadn't even listened to a podcast before I even launched my first one. So that was how green I was about podcasting, because I just trusted my co-host to bring all the expertise to the table. He'd learned how to do it and I just trusted him. And I sat there very sort of expertly just being a co-host. and then I realized, hang on, I need to learn more about this. So I started listening to other episodes, and then my podcasting ability rapidly improved, understanding what it was that the audience was really wanting to hear. And that's what's important for me, is really tapping into what your audience needs and wants and what it is that they value. So that's probably one of my first tips, is when you are looking to be a guest, is find out what that particular podcast is valued for by going to look at the reviews of what people have left there for the host of that show.
That's a really good tip. So I can't believe that you launched a podcast without having listened to any podcast.
I know. And I'm a really, really sort of planned and prepared person, but I was just so whipped up into the frenzy of doing all the marketing and all the other elements that I actually hadn't thought about listening to podcasts and doing that side of the research. And that's probably why I'm so keen now as a podcast host, and also as a guest, because I do guest on lots of other people's podcasts. I do a lot of research before I go onto their shows. I understand how they present, what they do, and what their style is, because everybody brings their unique style to a show, and you want to understand that before you just turn up ready to record an episode with them.
Oh, absolutely, because I really didn't like podcasts for ages, even though everybody kept saying, oh, you should get into podcasts, you should do this, you should do this. And I think the only podcasts I'd listened to were very much like a radio station full of noise and loads of people chatting about fluff and, you know, things that I was just like, come on, get to the point. And I found that really, really frustrating. But then it was the last boss that I had was like, Charlie, there are some really good podcasts. You need to just persevere and find the one that's right for you. Because I think there are so many different podcasts out there. You are going to find something that you enjoy, something that you find value. But if you haven't found that yet, it's just a case of, being a bit curious and exploring which one's going to work for you. Because I think it's all about the host, the style, the format, the audience, because, you can get lots of different formats. But then my client mentioned in passing once, he was just like, oh, I've always wanted to do a podcast. And at that point, he was very trusting. And I was like, well, let's do it then. What's stopping us? Went and had a look and just thought, actually, this is going to help us with so many different marketing objectives, mainly because we wanted to help the SEO of the website. So our strategy in that case was to write up the show notes, be very strategic about the questions we were asking our guests to help us rank for certain keywords. because you can easily transcribe the podcast episodes. Anyway, that worked a dream. And then their podcast is over. I think we've done 150 episodes so far. And then I launched my own podcast. But I think we were talking about guesting, because you mentioned that just before, and the benefits of being a guest, because a lot of people resist podcasts because they, rightly so, know how much goes into launching your own podcast, but then think that, right, okay, if you don't have time or money, or that's not the right approach for you, just scratch podcasts off your marketing list. Whereas to be a guest on somebody else's podcast is a really easy way to get into it. And there are so many benefits that come from that, aren't there?
It's a brilliant strategy, because what you're doing is you're putting yourself in front of an established audience. And if you've done your homework and you understand who that audience is for that particular show, you're putting yourself in front of potentially your future clients as well. And that could be on a global basis, more than likely on a global basis. So if that's relevant for your business, if it's a case of you being able to serve these people who are in the audience, then why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you go and guest and share your insights and your knowledge and your expertise on somebody else's show?
So we both love a process and a system for everything. So in your experience, guesting on other people's podcasts, do you have a bit of a system in place for that backlist?
I do. So what I do is I make sure that I go and do my research first. And this may be, if I've been invited on, then I probably know this show, but sometimes I don't. It comes completely randomly. And they've just approached me from email, and I look at that show and I'll listen to 2 or 3 episodes, recent episodes, and then I'll scan through and see how regular they've also launched that particular show. And for me, I will look at the reviews, as I said earlier. I will look at what type of guests they're coming on, and I'll understand a bit more about what it is they're trying to convey, looking at the show notes, looking at how they structured their show. So that's my first step. And then after that, what I would do is I would speak and I would ask for a pre-call, so I can have a quick conversation with the host of that show and really understand what it is, what their intention is, how long the show is going to be, what they would like me to bring to the table, essentially, what unique element I can bring to the table. Because when you're guesting and you're a serial guest, you want to make sure you're bringing something different to each of those shows. So what I will often do is I'll just mark what stories I shared on different episodes, so that I know that I'm not to overly repeat the same stories or the same anecdotes or the insights that I've shared on different podcasts, because I want to bring something new to that particular podcast for the guests, so that they've got something that is unique for them to share.
There's great tips there. And just for our audience, if you do have any questions about the process, the system, or just setting up your own podcast, guesting on somebody else's podcast, then please ask us in the comments. Any question goes. There's no such thing as a stupid question. And the other thing as well is about asking questions. If you have the courage to just put your question out there, I guarantee that there will be other people in the audience that have the exact same question as you. So you are not just helping yourself by asking that question, you are also helping other people that may not have the courage to ask that question at that time. And, there are so many benefits for, guesting on other people's podcasts or launching your own, that, explore it. It might not be right for you now, but it might be something that you want to consider in the future. Or, if you are exploring to see if it's a good fit for you, then the more questions that you can ask, the more informed you can be, because it is, it is a way upon your time. So as with every marketing activity, it's not just a cost. You are investing, whether it's money, it's time, or it's even energy. And, if you're a guest on somebody else's podcast, you are going to bring a lot of energy to that. So you just have to factor that into your day, and not make the mistake that I made once, which is having a client session followed by guesting on somebody else's podcast, followed by another client session, and then you're good for nothing the following that evening. I don't recommend that at all.
No, it's really important that you bring energy to that particular conversation, because if you think about it, that host has spent almost half a day on you. They're giving you half a day of their time for your 30 to 40 minutes, because what they're going to do is they've done some prep work. They've also invested in whoever is going to be doing the production and the editing of the show. They're then going to have to write show notes, produce some artwork, and then they're going to market it. Now, all of that process is going to be at least 4 or 5 hours of time, whether they're doing it themselves or they've invested in someone else doing it for them. You showing up for 30 to 40 minutes, it's the least you can do to bring your game to that table.
And there are also lots of marketing benefits that you can do yourself. Yes, the podcast host is going to do their own marketing for the podcast. They're going to promote the episode to their existing audience, but then you can also use that in your own marketing. Some hosts will give you access to the original audio recording if you want to create snippets or if you want to edit the video. Some hosts will do video and audio, which then gives you a whole different host of assets that you can leverage and repurpose and use again. So it's not just thinking about turning up, being a guest on somebody else's podcast, walking away and expecting them to do all the work. You can then leverage that in your own marketing to gain lots of other benefits as well. So some of my own, you could email your audience. So if you've got an email list, you can email your audience and direct people to that podcast, because that also helps the podcast host, because you're helping them promote their show, and it also helps you promote yourself. So it's all about looking for those win-wins. You can create like little snippets from the episode to tease people, to make them want to come back for more. A tool that I use is called headliner.app. It's free. That's why I love it. And you can do so much from it. You can use it for so many different things. So if it's just audio, you can use it to create a little audio snippet for a minute, tease people, let them know what they're going to expect from that podcast episode, and then put it out there. And Amy, what tips do you have? Because you've done lots of your own marketing for your podcast, and you've also been a guest and used that. So what are your tips?
Yeah, so what I do is I have a media page on my website where I have all the thumbnails of where I've appeared on as a guest on other people's shows. So I'm leveraging the SEO on that element of featuring their thumbnails with their links to their shows, and there are links to my specific episode that I've been on as well. So what that's great is that's bringing people to my website, looking at it, and then it's taking them to other people's shows. There's a bit of sort of self-promotion, but also cross-promotion there. But you're going to love this one. I use Otter, but not your Otter. I use the Otter AI transcript service, because what I do is I feed all of the conversations, all of the recordings that I have through Otter, and then I can pull out so much content of what I've shared either on my own podcast or when I've guested on other people's, because that then gives me huge amounts of content that I can repurpose for posts, for blogs. If I'm writing a particular blog on a particular topic, I can then look to see where I've actually said something about that, and I can reference that particular conversation in someone else's podcast. And it's just a constant material that is generated from that one conversation. So absolutely brilliant. So I 100% recommend thinking about how many different ways you can repurpose that conversation, and also build up. So you can say, this episode is coming out. This episode is all about these topics. This episode is out today. This episode was out yesterday. Did you catch it? And then you can then go review it. You can say, oh, did you manage to listen to this particular episode? It ties in with this particular content that's coming out today. So you can always refer it back to different conversations. So there's so many ways. Just think about making some notes at the time, some key points of what you shared in that episode, and having that as a stored resource that you can then pull on, so that when somebody does say, oh, let's talk about this particular topic, is that actually, yeah, I had a really good conversation, and then you can refer back to that particular episode, and you can refer people to it as an asset in your resources.
Guest podcasts, and if you are thinking of launching your own as well, are a really, really good asset if you are asked for your advice a lot. So, one thing, I spend a huge amount of time on LinkedIn. I know a lot about LinkedIn. It's something that I help a lot of people leverage. So I get messages from people all the time. Can I pick your brains on this? What would you do if this? How would you use LinkedIn to do this? And from a lot of people that either can't afford to work with me one-to-one, they can't afford to join one of my programs or join the Curious Marketing Club for whatever reason. So I don't want to be one of those people that's like, no, I'm not going to help you. You just got to pay for my services. So strategically doing a podcast interview about a topic that you get asked a lot is a great tactic, because you can then send people to the episode every time they're asking you for advice. So you're not, sort of spending any time repeating yourself on the same topics, especially with people that can't afford to work with you, but you're still being helpful, you're still being useful, and you're still giving people something that they can refer back to. So it's not just a great marketing tool to help with the curiosity aspect. So, you're not just putting yourself in front of a new audience and making them curious about you, but also you've got an asset that you can use to develop that curiosity and to make people go from just being curious about you to taking action and then thinking, right, I've invested half an hour, 40 minutes, an hour of my time listening to this person talk about their area of expertise. I like how they speak. I like what they offer. I like their tone and accent, which also plays a part in a lot of things. And, it's basically just fast forwarding that sales process so that you can get more high quality leads, so that you're helping people understand what you can offer them and how you're going to help them. So it really is such a great asset that it's not just a front end marketing tool.
No, absolutely right. And something else that is really important is to, when you're speaking with the host about what it is that they want to cover, ask them what it is that you can't say as well. So make sure that you've got that rapport before you go on air, before you press that record button, and just really understand what you're both trying to get out of the conversation. What I know audiences want is they want authentic, natural conversation. They don't want it to be overly scripted. They don't want it to be completely like, today we haven't scripted this, we've just turned up and we're just flowing. What that's what people want, because they want to hear it naturally flow. So when they hear you in this environment where you're naturally talking about your ability in your area of expertise, you're going to come across so much more professional, so much more at ease, because this is how you would be working with people. This is your way of your manner of demonstrating how you are and how you show up in the workplace. So it's a great opportunity for you to be exactly who you are in a natural space, not forced, and just really what I love about this is that it's a way to really get into and understand someone in a much deeper way than any other medium.
And there's something very personal and very I'm just going to use the word intimate about, listening to somebody else. You can read articles, you can sort of see what people are doing, but, you've got audio and video that just has that sort of extra level of intimacy that helps you really connect with from you as the host or the guest expert. It helps you connect with your audience more, but also as you, somebody that's looking and understanding who you'd like to work with potentially in the future, it just helps you connect on a much deeper level. So it's, we could talk for days about the benefits and the joys of being a guest or hosting a podcast, and even listening, really.
And I think the responsibility is there for you as a guest to really support the host in the marketing side of things, because I've had now with my second podcast over 180 episodes. And with my previous one at 64 episodes. So that's over 250 now across both podcasts. And the podcasts that have really performed have been where there has been a great synchronicity between me as a host or me as a guest and the host and with the guest. So that relationship between guest and host is critical. It's an absolute must of where you can say, when are you going to be posting? Where are you going to be posting? How are you going to be posting? What can I do to help? And if somebody says that to me, I almost fall off my chair because it's fantastic. But I know to say that to a host when I'm a guest, because it's so important with all of the effort. You're thinking about half a day's work with the host and an hour of the guest time. why wouldn't you leverage that as much as you can and cross-fertilize both of your networks, your audiences, and leverage all the platforms? And this is where the algorithms play their part in the marketing side of things. So making sure that you synchronize your marketing tactics and that you know when you're both going to be placing those particular posts across the different social media platforms.
Absolutely. And I kind of like drawing back to Otter. So not the Otter, the incredible transcription app that is nothing to do with me, but the Otter that is behind me here. So I try and do the right thing. So with podcasting, essentially, you know, there are different tools that you can use to help you be a guest, find episodes and do all of the sort of techie stuff, but also focus on the O. So the O of the Otter is objectives. Before you do anything in your marketing, understand what are your objectives, what do you want to get from that, and then also look at the E, expectations. I don't realize where my finger is pointing here, I've not done this before. Look at the E, expectations. What are your expectations of the host if you're going to be a guest? And do you understand what the host's expectations of you are? Avoid any disappointment and make sure that you are really making the most out of this opportunity, because, you know, you don't have to launch your own podcast. You can just get so much value from being a guest. But then also, if you do want to launch your own podcast, there are, you know, lots of other benefits that you can gain from that. But still go back to what are your objectives, you know, really, really important. And Lauren has just asked in the comments. So hi, Lauren, good to see you. And is asking what the best platform is for hosting a podcast.
It's a great question. So I use Libsyn. And it's a favorite of mine. I've used it for both of my podcasts, and it's one I recommend for all of my podcast clients who are launching. It's a solid system. It is absolutely brilliant. It feeds really well across all the different platforms, and it gives you so much good statistics and data that you can then sort of understand what your particular podcast is achieving, where it's charting globally, where it is featuring globally, where it's being downloaded. And they have a great support system. So if you have any issues at all with your podcast, if you're not understanding any elements, they've got a really good help desk ticket system that they can support you with. So it's not free, but there are ways that you can have different levels of, depending on how much you are going to be loading up each month.
I think it's like $5 for the basic account, isn't it? It's crazy.
Well, the $5 will probably just keep it's what I've got for one of my podcasts that is now sort of not dormant, but I don't add any new episodes to it. So it just keeps it there and it holds all of those episodes there so people can still access them. And then it rises up to, I don't know what it's, $150 a month. I fluctuate between $20 and $30. And based on the fact that I launch between 2 and 4 episodes a week, it's ample. So that's the kind of cost you're expecting.
And as a side note, so I used to use Libsyn. So the client that I worked with originally, they used to use Libsyn as well. I'm a big fan of supporting British companies. And one of my sort of networking and Twitter contacts, Mark Asquith, has a company called Captivate.fm. I moved my podcast over from Libsyn to Captivate. I think I want to say $17. Don't quote me on that, but it's around about that. British company gives you everything that Libsyn gives you, or rather, it gives you everything that I ever got from Libsyn. It's just as good. But it's one of those that, you know, use whatever you feel is going to give you the most support and give you what you need, because with podcasting there are so many different tools and so many different options. So if you're going to work with somebody to help you launch a podcast, there's always a benefit of working with whatever platform that they prefer as well. Amy, you help people launch podcasts. Like, I encourage people to consider podcasting as a marketing strategy, but you are the person that will help bring somebody's idea to life and make it happen. Do you want to just share a little bit of info? Because think you've got a program starting soon, haven't you?
I do. I've got a Launch Pod Mastermind. The Focus on Why Launch Pod Mastermind starts next Monday, and there's still a couple of places left. So if you are looking to launch your podcast in the next sort of 3 to 6 months, I highly recommend that you reach out and just have a conversation with me to see if this is the right thing for you and now is the right time. And I would take all of that cohort together. We're going to be collectively launching individual podcasts, and we're going to be going through the purpose, the audience, the concept, the branding, the strategy, the process, the technology, the expertise, the time, and the launch process. So we're going through those 10 steps together to really understand what a podcast can do for your business, and then how together collectively as a launch pod we can support you in that launch of the actual podcast itself. Now, I've been working with many podcasts over the last few months, and it's been absolutely incredible to see their success. And everybody measures their success in different ways. So it's not just hitting the top of the charts, it's the results that they then go on to achieve, and the connections that they're making with their target audience. And really, those connections, you cannot underestimate how incredible they are. I can't describe how a podcast has changed my life in so many ways. I'm a life purpose coach. I help people with that. But now, having launched my second podcast and both of them doing incredibly well, people are now coming to me to help with launching podcasts. So that was something I was not expecting, but I am willing and gladly helping people to launch their own podcasts. So with that, I just want to say, if you're not going to launch a podcast, that's fine. It's not for everyone. But if you are going to be a guest, invest in a good microphone and a good headset, because what you don't want is to have that disparity between the host having all the right kit and you coming on and having not so great sound, because there'll be a huge mismatch, and that will make for not a great audio experience for the listener.
Really good advice, and I recommend. So I have a Rode microphone. Just looking for it. It's over the other side of the thing. I have Rode microphone, and I use my Apple AirPods when I'm recording episodes. So it's invest in the good tech, because again, it's your reputation. You don't want to be that guest on the podcast with the grainy sound, or sort of dropping out every 5 minutes. So make sure that you're in a quiet space with good internet connection, decent microphone, decent headphones, and you'll do well. So Amy, if somebody wants to book a call with you or find out more about your mastermind, how should they do it?
The easiest way is to go to amyrowlinson.com, and my contact details are there. If you're on LinkedIn, you can DM me on LinkedIn here. And also, I know we're streaming across to YouTube and Facebook. So amyrowlinson.com is the easiest way to find me.
Brilliant. And just to echo, I mean, Amy and I met on a speaking competition last year. We were both finalists in the Professional Speakers Association Speaker Factor competition, and we've been part of a sort of speaking mastermind since. And the one thing that I will say, because I love a system for everything, whether you follow a system or not, having one is the most important thing, because it will help ground you and give you a process to follow, so that you're not wasting any energy where it doesn't need to be spent, or trying to second guess yourself and going around in circles. Amy is one of the most systematic and organized people I have ever met. So it's, I just think, if you have ever wondered, what if I started a podcast, or, I just want to talk to somebody about that, then, have a chat with Amy, and you'll get the right advice, and she'll see you through. If you don't like a system and a process, then you may be getting yourself into a bit of a twist when you do get around to doing it. So
you might be one of those podcasters that suffers from pod fade. You don't want to be one of those.
What's pod fade? Can't set us up with that and not talk about it.
Well, pod fade is where people have all the energy to launch a show, and then they realize that they didn't realize what was involved, and so their pod just fades.
Yes, a bit like mine, which is not faded, it's just in relaunch mode. So there you go. It's having a little bit of brand refresh. But Lauren, just to finish off as well, so I think, Lauren, it is probably worth you having a chat with Amy, because there's a lot of variables in your question. But Amy, if you've got any sort of words that you want to share.
Yeah, so your question is, how much should you buy budget for editing time and money? It's a great question, and it's why I have a whole section of my course that I either do one-to-one or with my group on time and understanding what money is involved. So absolutely just reach out and have a quick call with me, and we can go through that. So just DM me if you're on LinkedIn. That would be the best route from here.
Brilliant. Well, Amy, we could talk about this for a long time, but we wanted to get this wrapped up in half an hour. So thank you so much for joining me today. It's been really interesting. We will pop a link to Amy's website in the comments and in the post after the fact. And if you are not yet connected with me, send me a connection request. Let us know that this is where you found us. Connect with Amy. Keep the conversation going, but don't be afraid to explore your options. Podcasting is as accessible as you need or want it to be. So lots of opportunities ahead.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Charlie. It's been a wonderful chat today. I'm sure we could do this again. This is great. I really enjoyed this. So thank you.
Absolutely. I like live stuff, I think, and also interviewing. If you don't like speaking and thinking about what to say, interview other people. I love interviewing other people. My podcast is 80% interviews because it's just so much more fun. Plus, when you just talk yourself, you can end up boring yourself because you're talking about the stuff that you already know. All good fun.
Brilliant.
Right. Until next time, thank you all for joining us. #replay if you have a comment, if you're watching us on the replay, and see you again soon. Ciao for now.